Welcome back to another episode of Hawaii Business Now on the JPG podcast. I'm your host, Jean-PaulGedeon, and today I have an extremely creative, entrepreneurial, and all-around good guy, Jesse Arneson from Welcome Stranger.
Aloha.
Aloha. Welcome back. So despite any technical difficulties we had, we'll play the bloopers at the end of this, but we got through it. No one can keep us apart, Jesse.
It always happens, man.
You know, from the last time we talked, you look like you aged down. You look a little bit younger. You changed.
You know, I just shaved a mustache last week, and my wife, she's like, "Really? This is what you're gonna do?" And I was like, "Well, you know what? Why not? I'll just do it for a while and then shave it off." But you know, might as well look like a creep for a while. Why not?
Hey, anything to look younger, man. That's the fountain of youth right there.
Exactly.
Cool. Jesse, I want you to introduce yourself and your company, Welcome Stranger. Many people may not know, but in the industry, you're very well known. But for everyone else listening, can you give a short introduction to who you are and your company?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jesse Arneson. I'm one of the founders and co-creative director of Welcome Stranger. We're a branding agency. Rolling into, I think, about our third year of business. But I've been working here in Hawaii off and on in a couple different stints, but probably for over 10 years, I think. I used to work at another agency in town and worked at a number of pretty high profile projects then, and then decided to sort of start off on our own with my partner, Scott Now to start Welcome Stranger about 3 years ago. So it's been a great run so far, and we're excited to see where 2021 takes us.
Yeah. So can you name a couple of the projects that we might have seen, or can I go down a list that, we've kind of compiled together?
Please.
So in Kaka'ako, we all know the restaurant Moku. Excellent one. Yep. You've seen the green logo. You can't miss that street signage, like super iconic now. Red Fish opened up. It's a concept by the same owners of Foodland, the Poke Spot in Kaka'ako.
Yeah.
The White Sands Hotel in Waikiki. Your signature touch is on a lot of things, and I don't want to, steal what you're about to say, but
sure.
Can you kind of tell us about some of the projects that you've done, and for, 2021, some really exciting things came out that I would love if you would speak on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, at the previous agency I worked at, we worked at a lot of pretty big projects. So from the rebrand of Lion Coffee, which is probably 4 years old now, the Surfjack Hotel and Swim Club was a project that I did virtually everything on. Like Velocity, the big space, we did all the branding for that. Pretty broad range of stuff. And then since starting Welcome Stranger, we've worked on a number of different projects. We work a lot with Foodland on a lot of their expansion projects. So stuff that's not really distinctly Foodland. So for example, like Kahala Market that just opened up in Kahala, before the end of the year, we worked on that project with them, helped them kind of brand that space in and of itself. And then the restaurant in there at all, we helped them in that as well. But we've been very fortunate with Foodland because they've opened up, Redfish, for example. They've opened up a couple of different markets on Kauai that we've helped brand. We helped them with their calabash meal kits that they sell in a lot of their stores. So a lot of restaurant stuff, which has been really, really great, and they're amazing clients. We also helped rebrand the McNaughton Group, one of the larger developers in town. You mentioned like the White Sands for like hospitality stuff. Is a big one. Still sort of a project that still hasn't officially finished and launched yet. They had some like issues with permitting over time, and it's just taken longer and longer and longer. And of course, this whole COVID thing has sort of slowed it down even more. But we're really excited about the brand and where it's at. We're essentially done with our end of things. It's just the property hasn't fully like renovated at this time, which should be really, really cool. Let's see, we worked on, a couple of projects on the mainland. We worked on a restaurant branding in Montana. We worked on an automated smoothie truck concept out of LA called Ono Blends, which was really, really fun. It seems like there's a lot of food items that we've
I know you're going down the list. Food and hospitality is all there.
Yeah, exactly. And we've even helped a couple of cannabis companies work on rebrands. One was in Las Vegas, and another one here in Honolulu. We worked on some projects creating like new, like smaller exclusive brands there, which is a really fun space to play in as well. But then, like you mentioned, yeah, one of the latest projects that we just sort of pretty much wrapped up, we're still kind of working on pieces here and there, but is for the Kamana Beach Hotel. It was formerly known as the New Otani. And, you know, for those who aren't familiar with it, the Kamana is the original name of the property, built on Kamana Beach, kind of on the far Diamond Head side of Waikiki, in the Gold Coast there. And it's a property that, you know, I think a lot of people who live in Honolulu have loved for a long time. And it just kind of felt like it never got its like fair shake, essentially. So it was built, I think, in the 60s, had a great visions for it. And then the New Otani took it over, and it kind of just felt like there was no like effort put into it, unfortunately. And so the restaurant there, the How Tree, again, I know my wife's family who lived on Diamond Head grew up going there for brunch like every weekend. And it's just kind of a beloved space. And then, you know, Kaimana Beach right there is really sort of like one of Honolulu's like favorite like local spots to go and do the beach, you know, in Waikiki and in town. So I think, you know, having worked on the project, there was a lot of, not a lot of pressure, but I think there's a lot of invested into the project because it's such a great property. And it's really one of the only boutique hotel experiences on the water in Honolulu, or on Oahu for that matter. So there was kind of a lot of pressure to do something really cool and interesting for that. So we helped them rebrand it, refresh it, and then it's the same thing with the How Tree. And then concurrently with that, we're working on a big restaurant project on Maui at the Westin Ka'anapali, called Waikoko, which is great. So that'll probably launch, I think, you know, Q1, probably February, March, somewhere around there as well. So it's a little bit of what's going on right now, I think. We're also working with the Patagonia Honolulu. They're going through, they're opening up a new space here. Again, it's been delayed because of COVID stuff. But they have this new beautiful space that is massive. And we're helping them with some promotional pieces for that as well, which is really, really fun. Patagonia is one of those companies that I've just always admired and always wanted to work with. And so this is such a treat.
That's absolutely amazing. This you did your own thing, and then you eventually collided with someone you really wanted to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and they reached out to us, which is, you know, even better. We didn't really hunt them down and look for that. They reached out to us, which is, you know, as a business, is sort of like one of the most sincere forms of flattery is when people reach out to you and want to work with you. So it's really exciting.
Is that more flattering than when someone copies your work?
It's definitely more fun, I would say. That sort of flattery is a little bit harder to sort of like, you know, bring yourself down and rationalize that, hey, this is a form of flattery. But yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, okay, Jesse, you know, being on topic, being Hawaii business now, I want to talk about the now. It looks like a lot of your clients, you mentioned, are in the hospitality, either the hotels, which you guys have, you know, paved your way and became that style that people are wanting, that, you know, nostalgia that's really hot right now, and also the food. So how have you seen how your company fits in with the branding and the promotion aspect? How's your business been affected with COVID? Looks like it's moving forward. And then the second part of that question is, what can brands do now to stay relevant, and what can they do to move forward, you know, and be successful in these times?
Right. No, I mean, this year has been crazy. And, you know, kind of as we talked about before, I'm glad that we were small as we were, to sort of like be able to sort of, you know, move quickly, and we didn't have a bunch of overhead, and we weren't responsible for a lot of other people. And there's something that's really freeing about that. But I mean, I'll be honest, we've been very, very fortunate. As you brought up, we, you know, signed on 2 big projects in August of this year for a hotel and a restaurant. And we've been working at a bunch of restaurant stuff. You know, a lot of those projects were already sort of in the works and, you know, kind of in early spring. So they were kind of like, the project was already happening. They couldn't really pull out of it at this moment. So, but we've just gotten lucky. I mean, I guess right now is really, I think, there's a lot of people seeing that there's a huge opportunity right now. Well, a lot of people are saying like, yes, obviously, food and tourism are severely hit right now. But I think there's a lot of people, and especially it's kind of a luxury living in Hawaii because we know people will come back. Hawaii is one of the strongest brands itself in the world, right? And people will come back here. It's pretty much a given, unless something catastrophic happens, Lord forbid. People will come back to Hawaii. So we're lucky in that regard. So I think right now for a lot of businesses in Hawaii, it's really a great time to sort of like take a step back and find new opportunities. So people, I know there's a lot of companies who are snapping up older, hotels, and people are making things happen, getting ready for when people do come back. And so to respond to the second part of your question, really, like, I think we would say as a brand is like, now is the perfect time to start taking a step back and think internally and invest in your company. So when, the doors open again and people start coming back, like, you can be perfectly positioned and let all those other people freak out and let them fall to the wayside, but really like focus your message and your storytelling so that, you can make a clear and concise story and make a huge difference between your company and the other companies out there right now. It's a huge opportunity to do this. I mean, most of the time is like when business is good, there's never time to make this stuff happen, right? It's so hard for a company to dedicate the time and effort to sort of like take a step back, make sure that their brand is positioned correctly, make sure that all of the signals they're telling their customers are in alignment or they're doing what they want to be doing. It's most of the time you're just acting reflexively to what's happening in the market. And now is the time to like start thinking about, hey, how can we get the type of business that we want to get and like position yourself so you can get that and be doing what you want to be doing rather than just getting what you're getting. So for us, for people who create brands, we think it's a huge opportunity right now to work with that, with companies here.
That's a great answer. I see the same thing. It's not whether the glass is half full or half empty. It's, that's going to quench my thirst. I say, even if it's a little drop, that's going to quench it. And maybe that's enough to move on. So you're right. Huge opportunity. It's leveled the playing field in business amongst all the other bad stuff that has happened. It's still going on, but strictly from opportunity standpoint, this is the time when you can do it. A small guy, very nimble, can compete with the big boys that take a long time to steer that ship. It takes a long time to turn a tanker.
Exactly. No, it's like the slate kind of got wiped clean a little bit. In some ways, like you mentioned, it's like everyone kind of started over again. And so, as like a small company, oftentimes we always talk to clients about how, how do you communicate to your customers? You either have a lot of money, right? And you can invest in marketing and advertising through many different channels, and you can spend money and get in front of people's eyes, or you can do something different, right? And let people like talk about you because they're genuinely interested in you, right? We're always a fan of the latter. We want to create market differentiation. We want to create a different story. We want to stand out, right? We don't want to just like fit in with everyone else. Like, what's the point? Like most of the times we work with clients who don't have a ton of extra money, right? To just blow. And I think even big companies would say that, is it really the most responsible idea to be just dropping tons of money? So we need to do things differently. So that's really where the sort of collaborations we have with companies is most successful, is when they're willing to say like, okay, how can we look at this differently and do something different? And different is uncomfortable, ultimately for a lot of companies, because, it takes a bit of strength to sort of do something that, most people in the industry aren't doing. But we really think that's how you make a point of differentiation.
What are some tactical things that actionable items that companies can do right now? So if they only saw this part of the podcast and say we made this into a small clip, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, can you give a few things, maybe 1, 2, and 3, or just one solid thing that companies could do to stand out and to make a difference to their brand and even bottom line right now?
Right. I think we always talk about like the concept of brand positioning, right? And I think that's sort of like the core. So, what we do as a branding agency involves many different things. And most of it is like a visual expression of your brand, right? And how you're communicating to your customers. But we oftentimes help brands create and sort of clarify what their brand position and brand promise are, right? And those are sort of the core of like what you do and why you do what you do. And I think a lot of companies, if you were to ask them, they always talk about in like the entrepreneurial world, like what's your elevator pitch? But like if you were to ask someone like, you're caught in an elevator and say, okay, what does your company do? Can you explain that, quickly and succinctly, so someone understands it, like a complete stranger can understand it. And so brand positioning ultimately like helps you look at the market, you look at your competitors and sort of position your company, create like a statement that says like, who is your company? What do you do? And how do you do it essentially, right? And a lot of companies don't have this basic sort of roadmap. What this does essentially is create sort of like this piece that you can always look back on. So whenever you make businesses decisions or marketing decisions, you always look back at this piece of language and say, is this still in alignment with what we believe is our brand position, right? It gives you that cornerstone to move forward. And then the brand promise oftentimes is like the why you do what you do. And the why you do what you do is really trying to sort of create an emotional connection between you and your customers. If your customers don't understand the why, it's going to be really hard for them to sort of connect with your company, right? There needs to be like an emotional connection with a brand. If you don't have an emotional connection, you end up being sort of like a commodity, right? And people will just value you with everyone else and just get thrown in a list. And maybe you have whatever, like if we're talking about a hotel, a nice pool, and maybe they'll choose you because of that. But we want people to choose the brands we work with because they love what they represent, how they look, how they message, how they communicate, so that the customers can align themselves with that vision. And we think that's how successful brands live in this market, no matter what.
Excellent answer. So is that, go ahead.
Ultimately, what I was saying is like, now is the perfect time to take a step back with your company and like clarify those things and it's a little bit different than like your mission, right? Your mission can be a little bit different, but this is more like your company as a brand is communicating with customers. And that's where your brand positioning and your brand promise comes. So like right now is the perfect time to clarify those things and then use those truly as like that cornerstone moving forward. And so like everything you do should still align with those statements. And I think that's where I would start with a lot of things, because that's the hard stuff. That's the stuff that's so hard to do when you're busy, right? And that will like clarify your story. I mean, ultimately, one of the biggest problems with most companies is that they just don't have they're not telling a consistent story through their marketing efforts, right? It's like one day they're doing this because they think this is a good idea. And then, maybe the holidays come up and then they change their messaging to be this. And then everything becomes kind of fractured and dissonant. And we really believe in the idea of making sure that all your channels are in alignment. So you're telling a consistent message, because a consistent message is going to cut through the noise ultimately.
Super relevant. So is that something that you're saying working on your business right now? Because when you're on the day-to-day in your business and you're busy, you may drift from that. So externally for customers, clients, that helps them know what you do and why you do it. And what about the internally for your employees and your team? How does that affect it? Is that super important or?
Well, I mean, that's a great point in the sense that one of the biggest issues with like this idea of the brand promise and the brand position is that, there's like oftentimes like an executive team or the marketing team like works on these pieces of language. But the most important thing is that everyone in your internal company needs to have these same values and understand these things, so that when they're telling it, because that's a huge part of it, is that, if the marketing team is saying one thing, but then the like sales team is saying something completely different, like you're not doing any service. So ultimately, this messaging is really like the brand positioning and the brand promise is really an internal message. And that's to make sure everyone is in alignment with what the goals of the company really are, and how to communicate those things. So yeah, it really is about internal culture at this point and spending the time on that. But like, I guess secondarily, I mean, now would be the time for companies to rebrand and refresh, like this idea that, the slate has been sort of like wiped clean a little bit, or we're all starting kind of fresh again. I mean, now is the time to come out of the gates. A lot of times people are nervous about rebranding in the sense that they're like, well, we've looked this way for the past 30 years and customers aren't going to know us. Now, if we talk about the industries that benefit significantly from tourism, right? Now is the time to go through that, because there's like this pause that everyone's had this chance to pause. So when people come back to the marketplace, they're going to be looking, it's going to be a fresh mindset essentially. So now is the time to invest with new graphics, doing all that stuff, so that when the doors open again, like I said before, is that you really can stand out and make a difference.
So now, is this something you do as a service, that your team does for brands?
Yeah. Not Yeah, not always. It depends on the project, but a lot of times when we get in on the ground floor on a project, or it's like someone comes to us with like a big refresh or a brand new project, like oftentimes we will go through this phase, and a lot of clients find it like very helpful to have that piece of language and have this like document that's like a roadmap for everything moving forward from that point. Yeah.
All right. So what do we call that? Is that part of the brand guidelines or like a brand Bible? What do we call that? If someone wanted to Google it and look it up on their own and, try to do it themselves or even just get familiar before they call your company, Welcome Stranger, what would you call that? How could people search that to get a head start?
I think every company probably has a slightly different language. There's no like standardized piece of language. Like, yeah, there's sometimes it's called a brand Bible, your guidelines. All those are relevant. We call it sort of like a brand audit is what we would do with a company. So a lot of times it's this idea of going in and you kind of like survey like where a company's been, where they want to go, who their competitors are, who their target audience is. And then you sort of, from those things, we sort of churn those things around, and then sort of through lots of different meetings, we then come out with this like brand positioning and brand promise statement. Again, our role is really to understand companies and how they do what they do and what they want to be doing, and then help them translate that. That's really like what we do. We're not really coming in to tell you what you should do so much. We will give you advice on how to make those things happen, but we really want to understand the company as best we can so we can help them tell their unique story. So yeah, we call it like a brand audit. And then from those things, we kind of create these pieces of language that then they can tell their story and move forward. So that's what we would call it. Those pieces of language would then go into your brand guidelines. So your brand guidelines is usually like just like a PDF document that companies can refer to that has, maybe these core pieces of language. It has your logos. It has the standards of how your company should be communicating into that. And it's just like a nice reference piece. So that's like the actual physical or digital thing that someone references and looks at as the guidelines.
All right, Jesse, I'm doing a brand audit on you right now. I brought up your Instagram page, and this is what it says. Welcome, stranger. You're only a stranger once, working with forward-thinking companies to create memorable brands and experiences. Branding Studio, Hawaii.
Right.
I think that explains a lot. I mean, you guys do so much. It's pretty open. Like, it leaves you open to evolve, but what are some of the core things you do for a company? Are you guys doing, just branding, positioning, and do you guys do websites? Do you guys do video animations, or do you handle social media pages and profiles for people, or do you just create content for them? So how do we know like how to use you, and what do we contact you guys for, or just how do we know what you do exactly?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah. So what we've been talking about before this is all like the really high level stuff before we kind of get into like the visual end of what we do. So, you have like the brand audit, you create these positioning statements. And then for branding, like what we often do is we work on like logos and identity systems, right? So that's a huge part of our business. And then once we create these like core basic elements of the brand, then we sort of can express those in many different ways. So yes, any sort of like printed collateral obviously is like things that we do. Websites as well as like things that we do. Let's see, anything from like TV commercials to, yes, like sometimes we will help out with social media and create visuals for social media. We don't often do like full day-to-day maintenance of like social media, but we partner with people who can actually help facilitate and make that happen. It's pretty much like any way the brand wants to express itself, even from things like on the ground, on the property, we will help with like art and create art and unique things for the interiors of spaces. We don't do interior design, but we partner with interior design agencies. And sometimes there's ways to work the brand into the physical space as well. So it's a pretty broad type of work that we do. But I think the core of it is really like helping with like the visual identity. And that's probably like the easiest for most people to like understand what we do is like the visual identity. So in packaging is another great example of like a lot of stuff we do, creating like things that people actually pick up. I think it's how brands communicate, the visuals of how they communicate those messages, and then extended to like physical objects that, are touch points where like a brand actually, a consumer is actually touching a brand or a guest is actually touching the brand, whether it's, in-room compendiums to do not disturb signs. We're working with you guys on some of those, to signage, to, it's many different things. How you see a brand expressed is essentially how we can sort of help.
Wow. So you really become a partner with the brand and to help, whether it's wayfinding signage, packaging, the brand identity. So you're really working through step one to step done in every way a brand communicates with their customers.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And if we can't do it in house, well, we know people who can sort of help facilitate that. We work with a lot of photographers and illustrators to sort of help tell different stories as well on that. But yeah, we see ourselves as really partners in all these projects, and we try to emphasize that with our clients. And I think those are the most successful projects, is when we're sort of seen as a partner in a project as opposed to a vendor. We've had a lot of those sort of projects, and it just ultimately it doesn't work very well. Like, we're here to sort of, we want to be part of the team. We want to understand what your goals are and then help express them in any way that we can. But we want to get in on the ground floor. And, oftentimes we are fortunate enough to be working with like CEOs of a lot of these really important companies, like the people who are making the end decision. Again, we find a lot of times that projects really struggle when there's like layer upon layer upon layer upon layer people. So maybe we're working with someone down here, let's say someone who's lower off in the marketing department. We work on them in a project, and they have to get clearance from someone here, and then they have to get clearance from someone here, and they have to get clearance. Those projects virtually never work out, or they become so like watered down and uninteresting, the end product does, because we're not working with the people who make the final decision. So we really try to do what we can to try to work with, those final end decision makers and understand what their goals are, not what someone thinks their goals are. That can be really dangerous sometimes. So
I'm so glad you kept it so real right there, because that's a challenge that we run into all the time too. Sure. But you're saying working with a visionary, someone who's making a decision, you can translate out of that brain. But if there's these layers in between, it kind of gets filtered out, and all that essence of goodness is kind of like, now it's watered down and it's not the same.
No, and the work is watered down. And I think most people would probably agree with that. And then, what happens at the end of the day is that the client is unhappy with our work because, it gets watered down through all these different layers. And I think we're just saying it's like oftentimes those projects sort of struggle. Now, good work can come from that, don't get me wrong. But we really try to emphasize trying to get in with, the sort of executive team to understand truly like what their goals are and understand the project as much as possible. Information is so important for us, really, when it comes down to it. We just want, the more information we can get, the better.
Right. So you really brought it down to like an ideal situation. I want to bring up, you said you work with interior designers and everything. You guys have kind of formed a dream team. I like to call it the dream team, with a couple of friends we know. Can you give some shout outs to the companies that you're working with or that you want to? It doesn't have to be everyone, but go on.
Sure. Yeah. Like we worked on a lot of projects, especially all the Foodland projects and some more with Michelle Jaime of Vanguard Theory, who we love working with them. They're an amazing interior design firm. And I think we probably worked on 5 or 6 projects now with them. And I think, the more we work with them, the more we both like understand the synergy between us and how to best work together. So they're amazing. They oftentimes work with a guy named Jason from Workshop Hawaii, who's an architect. And so like, it's like those 3 people kind of help manifest, a brand into a space, right? Through interior design, branding, and that sort of thing. So that could be, we also work together on the White Sands Hotel. So again, Michelle and her team did all the interiors and the common spaces. Jason did, the architectural aspects of that. And then we worked on the branding. And I think those projects have all been really, really successful, because we can create a good brand and good like visuals for a company, but if like the space doesn't sort of maintain that look and feel, it sort of always falls flat. So it's really sort of a 3-dimensional aspect. We also work with Tiana Gamble from Creative Design Hawaii. They're an amazing team that does sort of any sort of like promo material, whether it's like hats, t-shirts. They can basically make anything happen. And Tiana is like the like hustler woman #1. She's like can make anything happen, and is so much fun to work with. So she's great.
Rock stars, by the way. Tiana and Michelle were also guests on our show.
There you go.
And they're also friends, and they're in Entrepreneurs Organization with me. We're all in the same. Yeah. So yeah, I can attest to that. Rock star.
They're rock stars. Yeah, they're rock stars, awesome. And they're so much fun to work with. They're just great people. So ultimately they're people that, we want to be working with in the future, and we're proud to work with because they're just super cool people.
Yeah. All right. So we're talking about what brands can do now. You covered that. You're talking about what you do. What are some things that where you see there's opportunity? We talked about opportunity. We kind of talked like kind of high level on it, but specific things that you see or brands, if you want to shout out like, hey, I could help you, Mr. Brand,
Right.
What are things you see? Because you see a lot. There's so much opportunity there.
That's a good question. I think there's plenty of opportunity. I think, and I'm sort of proud to be in Hawaii for like the past 10 years, because I really think that brands are getting a little bit smarter and savvier about how to communicate the Hawaii experience. And I think for me, one of the biggest things is, for so many years, everyone was kind of doing the same thing, right? It's like, you have to look Hawaii, you have to do things a certain way. Like, we have to have hibiscus flowers and we have to have the palm trees. And I think we're finally getting to a point where, we don't have to constantly be reinforcing those stereotypes over and over and over again. And I think that's really exciting for us to work on, because again, as a creative here, like, we don't want to be doing the same things over and over. We don't want it to be doing another version of those things. We want to bring some fresh ideas to this marketplace and find ways to reinterpret, refresh, and do things that the world is doing and bring a Hawaii spin on it in new, fresh ways. And I think that those are the sort of businesses that are really going to stand out. So I'd say, like, that's a huge opportunity right now, is to sort of define yourself in a way that is just something that's a little bit more unexpected. One of the brands or the companies or the institutions that I've always wanted to work with is like the Bishop Museum, for example, right? And I think, Bishop Museum has one of the most incredible like archives, and basically I think we learned that I think they, as far as like the number of items in their archives, they're the third largest museum in the world as far as like the number of individual items. And I think, that the estate there is great, and especially for every tourist who comes to Hawaii. If you ask them, where are you going to go when you come to Hawaii, and obviously, besides the beaches, you end up hearing like Polynesian Cultural Center.
Yes.
And like Bishop Museum has so much more authentic storytelling, or authentic items about the Hawaii experience in it. And why isn't that on the top of like the top 3 things that every like visitor to Hawaii has to do? And I think Bishop Museum has struggled through the years because it was primarily like an academic and scientific museum where they spent most of their money and effort on the science, right? And the galleries and the public side of it was always sort of something that they just felt like they sort of had to do and didn't really like invest a lot of effort into it. But I think over the years, they've realized that that's where they need to start generating money. And so, being involved with like a rebrand of the Bishop Museum and creating better wayfinding and signage and creating like a comprehensive system, to me would be sort of a dream project, because it's really, the Bishop Museum is really where, the story of Hawaii should be told. There's really not another place out there that's doing it properly. And I think there's a huge opportunity for Bishop Museum to sort of take that as their key cause, and sort of, make sure that every visitor comes there and they get the authentic story of Hawaii. I think, as someone living here, I feel like that's a story that's not being told properly. And I would love to sort of help them do that. But,
have you spoken to them?
We were involved with a project with them at my previous agency, and it sort of all fell through just because budgetary issues and things like that. It was really hard for them to make that happen. But I'm still rooting for them, and I still would love to be on that team, because that's really like a dream project for me. But there's plenty of companies. I don't think I'll shout out anyone in particular who's any companies. But there's plenty of companies here that have been around forever. I think for the longest time, a lot of restaurants and especially hotels got pretty complacent of just doing sort of the same thing, because there's always new customers coming. Hawaii is a pretty condensed and compact space. So like if you open a restaurant and you're doing half decent food, people will kind of come. If you're a hotel, and you have decent accommodation, people will kind of come and kind of fill it. And I think more and more people are understanding that you have to invest in these spaces and make them something that people want to come to, not just be there just to serve this new customer, like create a unique brand. So, essentially you can create value in your brand, and hopefully you can get people to spend more money on you because you create something that's more valuable than your competitors through branding.
All right. I'm so glad you said it. You took the words right out of my mouth. So a previous guest was Dominic Rinaldi from K2 Advisor. They specialize in mergers and acquisitions, M&A.
Oh, yeah.
He has his own podcast called the M&A Podcast. Helped transact over 300 companies. So you said value, and I wanted to tie something in there. How do brands create value? Because it's an intangible thing which translate into real tangible dollars,
Right.
How do brands do that? You kind of touched on it. And how does nostalgia play into that? Because that looks like a huge thing now. You know, whether it's a millennial who grew up and, I'm 38, so born in 82, and I like Ninja Turtles. I like Super Mario. If these things come about, like, I want to be a part of that. I want to relive my childhood.
Sure.
And a lot of people are doing that during COVID, this nostalgia of Jiffy peanut butter, Skippy, or, making a resurgence. What do you see? And so I'll kind of just reframe the question. How do brands create brand value, and how much does nostalgia play into that? Where's the opportunity with the nostalgia part?
Sure. I'm going to address the nostalgia part first, just because I think nostalgia is just one tool to communicate emotion, right? Like nostalgia is a very powerful tool that almost everyone, you can't deny that the power of nostalgia, the power that it has over people, right? The idea of like going back to your childhood or quote unquote better days, especially obviously when there's a worldwide pandemic, is always going to be appealing, right? But it's just a tool. And I think for some brands, to me, it's like, it's not something that every brand can apply because it just might not make sense for certain brands, right? Like if you are a skincare brand, maybe nostalgia isn't the way you should go, but it could be. So I think it's just a tool to really do. Obviously, in Hawaii, nostalgia plays a big part of the hospitality industry here. I mean, I guess it's probably one of the largest influences on creative is nostalgia, because there's this constant. Every hotel is trying to reinvent this, like the heyday of Hawaiian hospitality through graphics. And so a lot of the projects we work on, for example, are sort of trying to tap into that era. Because it felt like sort of a pure time, right? And I think obviously when people are looking to escape and get away, trying to connect into that nostalgia is hugely powerful, right? And kind of tap into some of the icons of Hawaii, whether it's Don Ho, whether it's Duke, any of these old classic names has a lot of power to it, and people trying to like tap into that history. So separating that from like the idea of value, I mean, we would say, you create value through creating a good brand. And there's no like one answer to how you do that, right? I mean, every company is different, and every company needs to communicate in different ways. But companies with strong brands, create more value. And a strong brand is something that people, essentially are willing to pay more money for a similarly priced than a similarly priced item, essentially, right? So again, if there are two coffee companies, right? Here in town, let's say maybe they're roasting like, Hawaii or Kona coffee beans.
Yes.
One with a strong brand will be able to charge more essentially for their product than the other one, because people want it more, right? We want to create desire, essentially. You can't just expect to create a product and expect people to love it. And I think there are times when that happens and you can find like a perfect niche, and that's how you should be starting a business. But you need to sort of like mold and create this thing and sort of like emphasize the want and the need. And that's through telling a compelling story. It's through great visuals. And so it creates this thing that becomes larger than just the product. It becomes larger than just the hotel. It becomes larger than and all these things. And it creates this experience that people want to be part of. And again, like I talked about before, it's, being able to communicate the values that your company believes in, so then people can sort of align with those values as well. So they believe in this something bigger than just the tangible thing that you offer. And I think branding is one of the tools to sort of help make that happen. And again, every company is different, and I can't really say like what, it's not like a 1, 2, 3 process. There's many different like aspects to it, but it's, making a great customer experience to having a really cool branding and messaging and doing something different and being consistent, and all those things create this like a brand that, and at the end of the day, it creates value for your company by being consistent. You want to create something that people want to come to you, not just, oh, I'll go there when I have to. You want to create this desire and need. So I don't know if that sort of like clarifies it at all, but it's kind of an abstract idea. But yeah, we always talk about brand currency. We want to create brand currency and create value for companies.
That's 100% excellent. That right there is a perfect clip. Put a headline. How do you create brand value? Bam, 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 bam.
Right.
Welcome, stranger.
Welcome,
right?
stranger.
Yeah, that's the plan. Hopefully my audio doesn't get all clipped out on this one, but no, I tested it first.
Exactly.
So Jesse, last time we spoke, you mentioned that you may or may not be working on some of your own merchandise, because you guys are such branding experts here and you have creative ideas. Did you make any progress on that? Was there any thing you can share and update?
We actually sort of did, every year for companies, and we help companies do this, and then we do it for stuff. But like, we have to do like some sort of a holiday present for our the people we work with. And so this year we did spend a little bit more time and effort on creating some items that are more like giveaways. But I think it's sort of also trying to dip our toes in the water of creating some products themselves that we will be, just trying to like soft sell. We might just we have an inventory that we just got them like yesterday, to be honest. And create an inventory and maybe just sort of sell them on Instagram. Just try to like say we have a couple of these things. Does anyone want to buy them? And just kind of like dip our toes into the water. We've had opportunities to do this. I think what's tough is that it's like a separate whole entity from our day-to-day business. We're working with clients, and that it consumes a lot of our time and effort and mind space. But to create our own line of things, it's like we have to sort of like splinter off and create this thing that we then dedicate and feed and constantly invest in. And so we haven't really like done it too much, but there's opportunities that kind of keep coming up that we could probably capitalize on if we wanted to. So it's something, we're still working on. Like I said, we have a few little products and things using some designs that we had come up with that we'll be sort of revealing soon. So yeah, I guess I would say we've made baby steps towards it. Baby steps at this point.
So are you familiar with Draplin Design Co?
Yeah.
So it looks like they did that. They're doing that where they have got all sorts of cool little merch and pins and very like, I'd say vintage nostalgia kind of 70s style field notes. And, I look at their style, I'm like, oh, I kind of want to buy some. This guy's just like, really, it's so cool. Really nice talking, I want to listen to him like a Santa Claus.
Well, yeah. Aaron Draplin is a brand in of himself. I mean, he's amazing. He's like one of the most charismatic, no nonsense, like no bullshit kind of like guys that you'll ever meet. So he is his own entity. But yeah, he was a designer, I think, for years, and then started creating products just because I think he wanted to. So he created those field notes, for example, like they're just like little notebooks, but like, everyone has known those things. I think probably in like the 2000s, they maybe are kind of like slowing down. They're probably like selling great, but like the brand is not as like what it was at one point. But I think the guy has made tons of money off of those things. So I think at this point, I don't know entirely, but I bet his business is like 25% design work, like for other clients, and then mostly just merchandise of his own kind of brand, his own things, whether it's field notes or he makes pins and posters, and then he does speaking engagements. Like he really has his own brand at this point. I don't know if that's who we are per se, but he's been super, super successful doing just that.
So you're kind of like a cool brand that does dope things. I don't know. You can say that,
I think if we were to look at like what our positioning statement is for Welcome Stranger, a cool brand doing cool, dope things, I think would be like how we would want people to perceive us. So at some point, if that's what people think, I think we're successful.
Well, I think that's why I asked you again. Like I don't know what you guys are creating with your merch. I don't know. Is it like holiday cards, or is it like something you're going to put in gift shops, like nice paper, real tactile feeling, not glossy postcards from Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I want to buy it. Like I just knowing you and seeing your style, it creates like a flywheel. Like we've seen the brands you guys are working with, and then you create your own merch. And then you guys are your own subject matter experts in personal brands. And then everything you create, people like that. So it goes back and it creates this flywheel.
Yeah, exactly. I think in the first interview we did is that I never really imagined myself being an entrepreneur or starting my own business. Like coming out of school, I was always like, I wanted to work with a group of people. I wanted to work at like a studio with other people. And I was never that person who's like, I want to start my own business right away. And I think it took me, 20 years in the industry or so, 18 years, I think, maybe, before like starting Welcome Stranger. And, you know, I think starting my own, or starting like our own product line or creative or like items or things to sell, I think is sort of one of those things, like I need to sort of like sit with it, get more comfortable with the idea. And then at some point, I think the iron will be like ready to like strike and like make it happen. So yeah, it's something that we're constantly thinking about how to do, you know, it's sort of in the back of our minds. And again, like it's something we do for every other client. Like, why could we be doing it for ourselves? It's just, I just sit with it. And at some point it's going to happen and there's going to be an opportunity. I'm going to make it happen. But, you know, Hawaii is a small place and there's a lot of really, really smart, creative and interesting people here. And like, the longer you're here, the more you just get in touch with these people. And I think more people, you know, the more opportunities they are to make these things happen. And, you know, at some point it'll feel just right to sort of like express that and make it happen. So keep,
this is why the show,
keep paying attention, stay tuned. Yeah, it probably will.
Yeah, I think someone will see the show. So funny thing with JPEG, we do a lot of things from design and printing and advertising and all that. But the number one thing, and this is for us kind of like a problem, that sometimes when people don't work with us and we see them working with another company, we're like, oh, okay, you know, how come you guys chose them? He's like, oh, he or she, whoever, I didn't know you guys did that.
Sure.
So because, you know, we personally do a lot of things for brands, we say from step one to step done.
Yeah.
Trying to express all of that in one statement or just line is hard. So there's some missed opportunities, but you know, this show right here, someone watched one of our episodes with Rob Mora, who was Uber and Hakkasan and Lyft representative in Hawaii. One of our partners saw it and he's like, oh my goodness, I watched your episode with Rob. I'm like, that episode didn't have like millions of views, but it was like the right people saw it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it just,
well,
right
okay.
audience.
So here's like, we have this great concept that we worked on that never went anywhere with another client. But we really feel like is super, super strong. And it's not like, it's kind of like something that could be applied to other mediums. But I think if anyone knows people who do really good like skincare with like a cool, unique Hawaii twist, we've got like the coolest brand that I think could just slay on the mainland. And so if anyone wants to get in touch about how to make that happen, we're like so game. So yeah, at some point, that's one of the projects that we want to work on. It doesn't even have to be skincare, but we have this, you know, we have this great concept that we've been sort of like chewing on for the past probably year and a half that, you know, we're trying to find some way to make it happen. Because it's really, really, I mean, from our end, it's really good work. It's really smart. It's really thoughtful. And we would love to make it happen. So
you guys have created a brand that you've created the soul of the brand, but you haven't applied the operational component to that or the financing. But you've got the brand.
Yep.
Wow, this is so mysterious. So how do we get access to this? Is it, you know, subscribe here now?
Right. No.
Full access.
Like I said, it's sort of one of those opportunities that I think at some point when it presents itself, it's like we've kind of got like our ducks in a line to sort of make this thing happen. We're busy people and we're not really like looking to make it or like pursuing avenues to make it happen right now. But I think at some point, if something like sort of starts falling in place or we meet the right people, we would love to make this happen. We have like everything we need to make a really badass brand. It's like, we just need like the follow through, like to sort of like, you know, whether it's like the manufacturing process or like the making of these, you know, materials and things that is like outside of our normal wheelhouse. Not hard in particular. It's just like another business that we don't have time to dedicate to right now. But
so who are you looking for? Okay, here's the needs and leads section of the show. And we're going to put this as section needs and leads on Hawaii Business Now. Needs and leads. Jesse, you know, this is a new section. I'm going to do this on every show. Needs and leads. Jesse, let us know what your needs and leads are right now. Needs?
I'm looking for a Hawaii-based brand who's making really badass like skincare products, right? With using like Hawaii scents, but using them in a more sophisticated way. Like we're trying to like move beyond like the classic, like heavily floral stuff. Building in something with like a little bit more body and denser, darker smells a little bit, you know, so something that's a little bit more contemporary and evolves beyond like the cliche Hawaii smells. And trying to express that and create a really unique standalone boutique brand for the mainland. I would love to partner with someone to make this concept happen. I think it's really, really strong. Like our end of it is basically taken care of. We just need someone to sort of like who's interested in making that happen, make it happen. So yeah. Hey, let's talk.
So because they're not going to watch this whole part, it's just going to be this small clip. What do you bring to the table?
We bring a, you talk about nostalgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
We just have like a really cool brand experience that sort of taps into this Hawaii nostalgia in a really interesting and I think unique way. Through and with some like brand language and like even the name of the company, I think is really unique and interesting. And it's basically, we have all the brand elements sort of like already built out. So it's like really like, it's like a house looking for someone to live in it to some degree. So yeah, we have all like the visuals and the creative side of it. And we really feel, we look at a lot of like brands and what's happening on the mainland and around the world. And we really feel like this would be a brand that could really do really, really great things.
So you're looking for a manufacturer?
Sure.
And you're looking for a company already in operation that you can plug this product into?
Yeah, potentially.
Partner with them to do a separate brand.
Yeah. Someone who knows. Yeah, exactly. Someone who knows scents, someone who knows, how to like get like really great products, that sort of thing. And then we have all the branding elements to like help make that and manifest and tell this really unique story. So yeah, we'd be interested.
Okay. So we need the operations, we need the manufacturing and financing. But as far as branding, the brand voice, the visual components, which, is the soul of a brand and really differentiates and a huge cost, ongoing cost, that's something you guys would bring to the table. And that's where you fit in the equation.
Absolutely.
Wow. I love this section already. Can I just leave this out and can I just come in? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I got some manufacturers lined up, my friend, and we could put some financing in there.
Talk. I'll show you some secret
let's just share it. Yeah. So needs and leads, best section right here. Jesse Arneson. We're just about 1 second from boom, the hour mark. And cool. I don't know about your schedule. I'm open, but I think this is a great part to end on here, and we can revisit on another time. So needs and leads. Jesse, is there anything else that I kind of missed? Like, we talked about who you are, what you do, who you work with. You gave some real takeaways and actionable items for the viewers here. I know, kind of putting you on the spot, but can you give me 5 hot takes? 5 hot takes of what's going on right now, fresh in your mind, that if this was your show, because you just took over the show, this is the Jesse Arneson hour.
Boy, I have no idea, man. I have no idea. I think we covered basically like what we're about. I think what it comes down to ultimately is that Welcome Stranger really feels like we're trying to do something a little bit different here in Hawaii. And I think we have the sensitivities to understand the sort of Hawaii stories and marketplace, and tell like these really interesting, unique, authentic stories. The stuff that's beyond like the normal sort of BS cliche stuff. I think we really understand this market in a way. My partner Scott grew up here. I'm not from here. And I think that dynamic is actually really, really, really strong. And really, really beneficial to us as a company to understand these two sides of the coin, right? We understand the embedded side of what it's like to grow up here and like the depth of living in Hawaii. And then myself as an outsider, I think sometimes you can bring a really interesting perspective to that mix. And I think that's sometimes what's missing in a lot of the marketplace here. We really think that's a strength for us, is that the two sides of the coin and the double perspectives is what really sort of helps us tell these really interesting and compelling stories. And we can bring something fresh to the table from an outside perspective, but we understand this place and its unique nuances, like no other agency in town, studio in town. So
that's a bold statement, my friend, but I believe it because I've seen your work. So I know you're not just making this up.
Thanks, man.
All right, Jesse, your favorite quote that leads us out. Can you give us your favorite quote?
Favorite quote
to close us out.
Oh man, here, hold on. You're gonna have to give me just a second. I have them written down. I don't have it off the top of my mind. You can edit this out.
No worries. Google it.
Share your screen
and see everything. Yeah, no worries.
Man, I don't even know if I have it anymore. Okay, I mean, here's a quote that I really liked. I came across this like just a couple of weeks ago, but one of the quotes that really resonates with me and I think is really relevant, especially in my field. But there's a professor who told one of their students, this was relayed, but like, you're only ever a good designer as you are interested in the world. And I think that's ultimately like what we do, is that, good design and good creative is really about seeing these really unique little moments and then tapping into that and expressing it in a way that everyone can sort of relate to, right? It's really about paying attention to the world around us, right? So for us, whether that is looking for inspiration into, just some sort of like unknown avenue, digging in just a little bit deeper, finding these things, or expressing something that everyone's seen before in a new and different way. It really comes down to like just paying attention to the world and being interested and engaged. And, I read a lot. I try to, look and see, what's happening in the world and the news. It's really about being aware of where we are and being aware of what's happening in other places. I think is really important too. I think in Hawaii, it's really easy at times to get a little myopic and, just pay attention to what's happening here because we're so removed from everyone else. But I think really good ideas often come from outside of Hawaii, and then we can bring those here and sort of express those in really unique and interesting ways here in this place, and make sure that they're relevant, obviously, to this place. But it's Hawaii's ripe for like new and interesting inspiration as well. So yeah, I mean, I think for us as designers, just paying attention to the minutia, I think is incredibly valuable.
All right, I like to ask this of everyone. I'm going to ask it to you too.
Sure.
How much of your success so far has to do with luck, and how much has to do with hard work and hustle? I think Guy Raz said this on how I built this, so I'm stealing this from you, Guy. Thank you, homies. Guy Raz, shout out.
No, it's a great question, and I think I think the answer, because I've listened to that podcast quite a bit, and I think the answer always, well, it's like there's shades of it, but it's always like it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, I think there's a huge amount of opportunities that have just been sort of given, to me, and it's always about like making the most out of a given opportunity, right? And seeing them as opportunities, I think, is the biggest part too. Some people may not even see when something's presented to them on a plate. Obviously, white privilege has a lot to do with it. I mean, being a white guy, I'm naturally like have been given sort of a leg up over a lot of other people in a lot of different ways. But ultimately, it's luck plays a huge amount in what we do. But luck only works. It only like manifests itself or makes itself happen when there's hard work applied to it on top of it, right? Or the hard work that you've done will put you in, previously will put you in a position to sort of make something magical happen when luck presents itself. But I mean, obviously, I mean, luck dictates a lot of our life to like, chance meetings and people reaching out to you who you don't know. But ultimately, it only goes so far if you can't like make it happen and hustle and put the hard work in to make those things really like come to fruition.
That is a real answer. I'm so glad you didn't say like luck doesn't exist, but because some people are like, I just hustle my way. It's just hard work, perseverance. But you brought in, luck and being prepared.
Right, exactly.
To execute on that luck.
Exactly.
All right. Jesse, without further ado, it's been great to talk to you. We're going to chop this one up.
Perfect.
I'll send it to you. Aloha from Hawaii and from Hawaii Kai. Oh, I'm not even in Hawaii Kai. Aloha from Waialaiki in the mountains. That's where I'm at. I grew up in Hawaii Kai, so I'm like, I'm a Hawaii Kai boy.
Right.
You're in Kailua? Aloha. Are you in Kailua right now?
Yeah, I'm in Kailua right now.
Where are you at?
I'm at the Treehouse co-working space. We have an office at Treehouse. But I live in Kailua as well. And Scott lives in Kaneohe. So we're both like windward side most of the time. And I love being on that side. It's great.
Awesome. I'm going to chop this episode up.